Awesome. So let's go ahead and let's get started. Again, most of this is going to be me talking. If at any point in time you have any questions, comments, cries of outrage, please stop me, take yourself off mute, use the chat, kind of whatever. Chat's harder for me, but still works. So unmuting yourself and interrupting me is better. And interrupt me mid-sentence. This is very informal. So my name's Chris Gregory. I'm one of the field supervisors for West Med. I don't think I've met, no, I have met Ryan. I think I met you, right? I think,
Yes.
wait, oops. Okay, I didn't hear that. I'm sorry. Oop, I think you're off mute. There you go. You're off mute. I just didn't hear it.
Uh, I'm not sure if we met in person.
Okay. All right. Well, it's good to meet you guys. I'm out here in Pennsylvania, but I'm one of the field supervisors, and so I'm always on call. I'm just a phone call away always. So the plan for today is, oops, let me just share the whole desktop. So we're going to go through all the policies that Santa Clara County has requested that you guys know for this test. They've given a couple of resources. So the specific one that I based this study session off of is this PDF, where they essentially said, "Hey, here are all the policies that we need you to know, and then here are the potential questions that are referenced from that policy." On the exam that you're taking. So some of them, like 602, has 8 questions. Policy 605 has 5 questions. We're going to spend a little bit more time on those two. Those two happen to be very challenging policies as well, so it makes sense that they're testing off of it. I have gone through and asked people once they have finished their test to let me know kind of how was this course. And it's still kind of under the beta version, but once you're done with your test, if you could give me a quick call and then just let me know how the test went, so then I can record your results, but then also how well did I do in preparing you. What that means is that I have a lot of information on potential questions that are on the exam. And so anything that you see in this slideshow that's bolded, that's going to be something to just kind of put an asterisk next to because you might see it as well. And then I also have a little quiz that we're going to go through to kind of break up my talking. And hopefully that will help as well. So before we start the PowerPoint, though, I also want to direct your attention to kind of where you can find the policies. So if you just type into Google SCC EMS agency, it should be the first link, so ems.santaclaracounty.gov. And if you click on that, under documents and then policy manual, that's where you're going to find all the policies that we're talking about. So I'm going to project them up. But for instance, when we're talking about our first policy, policy 108, you can find that just right here under 108. And that's also, all of these are in the PDF that I sent you guys, or the zip folder that I sent you. There were a couple updates. This is the first class I've taught in 2025. So there were a couple updates, but we'll go through that on this. One other thing that I want to just point out on the EMS agency website is under services, credentialing. And then there's a blue link for this credentialing portal. What Santa Clara County would like for you guys to do before you show up for your test is to create an account on here. Just an account, that's fine. Once you pass your exam, what they're going to want you to do is go under applications on the left-hand side, go under EMS orientation, or what is it? Yeah, EMT accreditation. So this one, and then go ahead and start that application. Don't start it until you have passed your test, though. Start it afterwards, but just do have an account ready before you take the test. For the EMT accreditation, they are going to ask you to submit a fee, so to pay for it. Keep that receipt, because after your 90 days at WestMed, we'll reimburse that. We keep the 90 days just so then you don't come with us and immediately drop. But we reimburse a lot of things, even like your uniform things like boots, belts, watch, things like that. A lot of things you can get WestMed to pay for. So I don't know if they want me to tell you all of that, but I will, because I think that that's important for you to know. It's your money. So I'm going to just get this one back on the policy page because I'm going to need that in a second. But then, so the goal of today is to increase the passing rate and to get you through that test. Some not test content things that you need to know, though, all comes from a memo that Gabby sent out. It's this one, so it's under your zip folder as well. And the big thing is arrive on time. So early is on time's late. If you come after the start date, Gabrielle will shut the door and you will not be able to get in. So do make sure that you are ready to go. Additionally, if for any reason you need to cancel your test date, make sure that you email her, call the agency, let me know as well beforehand. Just because if you don't, no call, no show, or anything like that, that's just going to look poorly upon Westmed and also you. When you arrive, arrive dressed professionally. So I don't believe you guys have uniforms yet. If you do, come wearing your full uniform. If you do not, come in business casual, but with an emphasis on the business portion of business casual. The shirt that I'm wearing right now, I'm not sure if that would be accepted. It's short sleeved and it also has all these little dots on them, which I think are fun, but they want you to look really nice for this. Additionally, sorry, no hats as well. Keep that in your car. We already talked about having a profile created for the test itself. So it's 50 questions. They need you to get an 85% or greater. So that's 43 questions correct or more. If you get less than that, no worries. They'll let you retake it at the next available testing session, but that just delays that accreditation. Also, just to kind of put it out there, I failed my first attempt and I studied hard for this test. So it is a challenging test because it is very nitpicky. So for instance, for CPR, 110 beats per minute, not 100 to 120. So things like that are very nitpicky. And then also just there's so much content. They've given you kind of all the policies that they'll test on, so hopefully that'll help. But this is just a tough test to get through. So thank you guys for being here. Hopefully that will help you get through it. So the county itself, there are a whole bunch of statistics on this page. None of them are tested. The things, though, that will show up, though, is that we have a boatload of EMTs in the county, but we do not have a ton of medics. This test is never going to ask you a paramedic protocol. So for instance, it's not going to ask you what is the dosage of glucagon for a hypoglycemic patient or something. It's going to say instead, overall policy-wise, like what should we do in this situation? But there's nothing, so don't pay attention to exactly the paramedic things. There are 12 hospitals within the county. We are going to need to know all 12 of those. So that's that policy that has 8 questions. There are a bunch of them on the hospitals. So just to kind of look forward to that, we're going to get to know those 12. And then Dr. Miller, this is a photo of him. It's not a great photo, but that's our medical director for the county. Dr. Johnson, so Samuel Johnson, he's Westmed's medical director. So you're going to hear me reference Dr. J and Dr. Miller. Dr. Miller is Santa Clara County. Dr. J is us, is Westmed. Hopefully you get to meet him. He's a really cool guy. Currently works up in let's see, Auburn, Reading, whatever that city with an R is next to Auburn, in urgent care, and worked for like 22 years at the Alameda Hospital in the emergency room. So great physician. So let's go ahead and let's get started on those policies. What I'm going to be doing is I have some Spark notes listed here on the slides themselves, but as often as possible, I'm going to actually pull in the policy itself and we'll read through the words. That's to just show you that I'm not making things up. And then also, so then if you ever need to find this information again, you can find it in the policy. So we'll start off with system variances. So a variance is something funky that happens, something not scheduled, something outside of routine. And it can either be something dangerous, so a level A variance, something that could have been dangerous, so a level B variance, like a near miss, and then also something good, so someone who provided outstanding care. If we have something dangerous, so a level A variance, that specifically is any deviation from policy that resulted in patient harm, medication error with patient harm, something else with patient harm, equipment failure, and things like that, or also anything specifically illegal that hurts people. So fraud, negligence, incompetence, kind of things like that. So when that happens, 2 things must occur. Immediately, you need to contact me. So you need to contact your on-duty supervisor. That's myself, Spencer, or Aaron, either 3 of us. And then we need to immediately contact the EMS duty chief. So Spencer, Aaron, and I, we are Westmed's field supervisors. The EMS duty chief, that is the county's essentially field supervisor. So immediately we need to let the duty chief know, hey, this is what's going on. Additionally, within 24 hours, we need to complete an online form. So I'm back up here at the policies. I'm going to go all the way down to the forms down at 900. And the last one is the system variance reporting. So if you click on that, it gets you essentially like a Google form type thing. And that's what needs to be filled out within 24 hours for a level A variance. So you're going to put in your title, your name, event number, it was whatever WestMed gives you, agency affiliation, WestMed, your email address. For additional email recipients, you're going to put in ODS at westmedemails.com. Incident reported to, you're probably going to put down Spencer, Aaron, or myself. And then you're going to click whether it's a level A variance, level B variance, or level C variance, and then write a narrative. For the narrative, most PCR narratives, they need to be in third person without any justifications or any kind of rationales, just facts, what happened. For this one, we really need everything possible. So that's the online form that for a level A variance needs to be submitted within 24 hours. And again, level A, something bad happened, someone got hurt. For a level B variance, no one got hurt, but it could have been bad. So a near miss, something that clinical care variance, poor interagency coordination, a complaint, kind of things like that. For these, we do not need to contact the duty chief at all. But we do need to complete the online form within 5 business days, so a week. And then for a level C variance, something awesome happened, and we just need to complete the online thing within 7 business days. From there, the EMS agency, they're going to determine what to do next, whether it's something you need to investigate, in which case they're going to use an outside source to investigate, or if it's something that they're just going to kind of keep tabs on or do nothing about. We do a lot of continuous quality improvement, so that's what most of this goes into, and just kind of extra training. So that's going to be our first policy, 108. Next one, policy 500, is looking at our electronic PCRs. And this policy, what we need to take out of it is relatively simple, which is that any time that there is a EMS response, then we need to complete a PCR. So every EMS response for each responding agency that occurs needs to have an ePCR. In terms of what's in the ePCR, this gives you just a lot more information, but specifically all of the minimum documentation standards is going to be on the PCR itself, and you're not going to be able to submit it unless it has everything that needs to be done. These ePCRs, the E stands for electronic, and the reason why we do electronic PCRs is so then we can get the ePCR to sync with NEMSIS, which is the National EMS Information System. So in the state of California, all PCRs need to be done electronically, unless we're not able to do that, which happens oftentimes. Your ePCR could run out of battery mid-call. You could have a malfunctioning ePCR. It could not connect to the cell network. There are a bunch of reasons why it would not work, in which case you can go on to paper. Hey, Matthew, welcome in. All right. Matthew, real quick, what is your test date for the Santa Clara County badge? And feel free to unmute and turn on your video as well. All right, Matthew, are you there? Bum, bum, bum. Okay, Matthew, once you're all set up, let me know. But back to this policy 500. So every response needs to get a PCR. Our next one, policy 501. So this is looking at hospital radio reports. So there are a couple of things within there, and this policy also just got updated with the new 2025 version. So hospital radio reports is your ring down report. So letting hospital know, oh, no problem, Matthew, for being late. So letting your hospital know essentially that you're coming in with a patient and then the level of severity of that patient. Let me just send Matthew that message. All right. So with the ring down report format, that's something that really you hopefully got an EMT school or whatever agency you've worked for previously. That's not going to be tested. And really the biggest thing when you're actually in the field is just do it as quickly as you can, do it as thoroughly as you can. But the big things that we're looking at is if there is a specialty center that you're going to. So for instance, if this is a stroke alert, a trauma alert, a STEMI alert, that needs to be mentioned at the very beginning so then they can know, hey, this is a bigger kind of fish that we're frying. And then also if it's a decontamination patient, so if they were previously contaminated, we just want to put that in as well. From there, there are a couple other specific things. Yeah, and here's that decon alert that we want to put in. There are a couple other things we just want to make sure to know. So in terms of the radio channel, there are a number of channels that WestMed uses and the county uses. WestMed, we have our own radio system that's independent from the county. So that's where you can see that we're on channel Loma, channel Devils, kind of whatever are the big mountains around us, Allison. On the county radio, there is county EMS, which is the one that dispatch goes through for the county, but then there's also command 92. So for a ring down report, we're using command 92, not the EMS channel. So we just need to just kind of flip the channel a little bit. Additionally, we're always using plain language. So the only codes we're using are code 1, 2, 3, and 4. Code 1 is a pre-scheduled transport. Code 2 is either you're transporting a patient in the back, but the lights are off, but typically you're going up a level of care. So from a care center to an emergency room, from someone's house to an emergency room, from an emergency room to a specialty center or something like that. And then code 3 just means that you have lights and sirens on. We'll talk a little bit about code 3 in a second, just because anytime that we go code 3, we need to contact the county to get an event number. And then code 4, everything's fine, essentially. So if you get a welfare check and you respond code 4, that's fine. But that's really all the codes that we use. In EMS, we don't use the 10 code system. If there's something confidential, we just won't share it at all. Let's see, I am the on-duty supervisor today, and I'm getting a call from dispatch. So I'm going to go ahead and pause real quick. Hang out for just a second. Sorry about that, guys. That's the joy of being the on-duty supervisor. All right, so back to this. So plain language, we're not using codes. If anything bad happens and the county needs to get a hold of a particular group. So for instance, if let's say you're at a mass casualty incident and something becomes unsafe there and they just need to really quickly get something out to everyone, they're going to use a warbler tone. And that warbler tone means, hey, everyone listen up. We have critical safety information that we need to disseminate. So for us, we don't really use the county radio that much, but if we happen to be on it and we hear that warbler tone, that just means don't talk over it. And then the last one is the emergency button. So this is my radio, and at the very top, you can see this orange button, and that's my emergency button. For my particular radio, I can turn it on. I haven't programmed that to do anything, so I can hit it and it makes a fun kind of beeping sound. On the county's radio, it does something. So as soon as you hit that emergency button, and that's in any of our vehicles or any of the handheld radios that we need you to have, it immediately locks every single person's radio, except for yours and dispatch. Creates kind of like a single channel. It sends its GPS information to dispatch, and unless you can talk to them and tell them what's going on, they will send emergency services to your location because they're assuming that you're being shot at or something. They are unfortunately easy to accidentally hit. And so if you do accidentally hit it, what the county wants you to do in terms of saying, whoopsies, false alarm, is to go onto the radio and just say, no further assistance necessary. So that simple phrase just kind of says, whoops, my tail's in between my legs, I accidentally hit it, sorry. Don't send the military to come and find me, everything's good. So that's the last big thing that we need from policy 501. Matthew, are you all situated? Are you good? Okay, awesome, cool. So the only one that you missed was system 1 or policy 108, level A variances. That's someone is or something bad happened and someone got hurt, and they just need to immediately be reported to the duty chief as soon as you can. And then afterwards, you and I can talk a little bit about all the introductory stuff. So let's talk about policy 502, which is patient consent and refusal for EMS services. The spark notes here is value patient autonomy, but ensure they're eligible first. So if we take a look at the actual policy itself, so 502, the first thing it's going to talk to you about is kind of some definitions. So an adult is anyone who is 18 years of age or older. Later on, we'll talk about pediatrics. Medically, a pediatric in Santa Clara County is going to be something 15 or below. Legally, anyone less than 18 is not able to consent unless they are or were legally married, is on active duty for the military, has not just court-declared emancipation, but also the paperwork to prove it. And then also for this last one, they are pregnant actively, and they're seeking medical care related to that pregnancy, or they're seeking care related to prevention of the pregnancy. So for instance, if someone is 16, they're pregnant, and they have a broken leg, they're not going to consent by themselves. Then we need mom or dad or someone else to consent on behalf of them. But if they are pregnant and they say, hey, I need help with this pregnancy, cool, awesome, then we'll be able to let them consent and kind of take control of their own medical needs. But that's the funky one for minors. For everyone, though, they do need the capacity. So even if they are emancipated or in the military and a minor, they do need to be ANO times 4. For this, if they're not ANO times 4, we need to document that they are not ANO times 4, and then specifically kind of what about that made them not able to consent. Because again, autonomy is key. We're taking someone's right to consent away. And so we just need to make sure that that is documented thoroughly. In terms of legal representatives, there are a ton of people who can consent on behalf of someone. Specifically, though, we need paperwork for most of this. So if it is a parent, cool, awesome. I'll love to see your ID and make sure that checks out with the minor. If it is someone who has a advanced directive or power of attorney, I just want to see the paperwork so that I can verify that what you're telling me is real and that you're actually allowed to do kind of what you are wanting to do. If anyone is fighting, we're just going to go off of the most conservative action and then potentially contact the hospital and medical direction to figure out kind of what else we need to do. If someone is either not 18, not ANO times 4, or under the influence of drugs, alcohol, or suicidal, then we're going to use implied consent. So hopefully you remember that from EMT school or your previous work as an EMT. This essentially says that we're going to do the emergency doctrine. We're going to take care of their life, but that's pretty much it. So we're not going to do the pedicure for them. We're just going to take care of their life or limb threats. So in terms of that, individual is legalized to authorize refusal of care. So they have to be an adult with capacity or that minor that was legally authorized, but with capacity. And then they cannot be suicidal and they cannot be under the 5150 psychiatric hold. So 5150, that's our 72-hour essentially welfare hold. So this is if someone is a danger to themselves, danger to others, or in a gravely disabled state. WestMed, we do a ton of 5150 transfers, and on there, that's involuntary consent. So even though they might be saying, I do not want to go, since we have that 5150, thank you for playing, we're still going to transport you. Again, do it as kindly as possible, but we have that right. So in terms of procedure, we need to identify that patients have capacity. And then if they consent, great, awesome. If they do not consent to whatever treatment, then we need to make sure they thoroughly understand what we wanted, the danger of not consenting. And then if they understand that and they can kind of repeat back to us what we're saying, then we need to try to come up with a new plan for treatment or transport, whether that is having us transport you but not treat you, having someone else transport you, or just knowing that you can call 911 again. Do try to convince them to go with you, though. But if they do not want to go with an ambulance, there are alternatives. They can have someone else drive them to the emergency room. Be careful about having them drive themselves to the emergency room with a medical complaint. So just kind of communicate that. If they are with law enforcement really wants to stay away from medical emergencies, psychiatric emergencies, kind of all of the above as much as possible. A lot of that comes from fear of the whole police violence situation that we're kind of dealing with right now in America. A lot of it also comes from previous patients that have hurt themselves in law enforcement care, and then law enforcement has gotten kind of dinged for that. Right now in Santa Clara County, if someone is under a psychiatric hold, they cannot be transported by police because one person was being transported from one jail facility to another, and they're in the back of a vehicle, and they whacked their head against the side of the vehicle up to the point where they died. And so now the whole jail system has said, nope, we're not touching those patients. We're going to call WestMed, and WestMed's going to do it. And so that hopefully will protect the patient. But a big thing about kind of that law enforcement disengagement, if they want to release a patient to you and not accompany the patient, first off, no crime needs to be in progress, and then no one can be at risk. So if the patient is a threat to public safety, we need a law enforcement agent with us in the back of the ambulance. And then also if the crime has been committed, then we need them too. But if none of that is present, then peace officers, they can give you the patient and then not transport with you. And we see that a lot with things like 5150s, is that they get called, they write a 5150, they transfer to us, and then we take them from there to a mental health facility as opposed to a jail. And then in terms of the documentation, we just and really document everything possible. Because in 7 years, when the statute of limitations comes up, we need to be able to justify that, yes, like we did not have the autonomy needed for this transport, or no, the patient was able to consent, and that's why they refused care, and so they're not kind of our liability anymore. One more kind of just asterisk about this one is consent is always kind of a touch and go place within EMS. So someone, they can consent to everything, they consent to nothing, they can consent to half of this, and they can also consent and then later on unconsent. So if, and the policy is going to talk about this in a couple policies, but I just want to kind of preempt this. If someone consented to your treatment or transport, we're halfway to the hospital, and then they say, you know what, hold on, I don't want to transport. Can you let me out? Sure, absolutely. We need to verify that you are indeed able to consent, but then we can just go ahead and let you out in some safe area. Don't let them out on the side of the highway, but we do not need to continue to the hospital. We do not need to return back to the start. We're just going to let them out in a safe area. And that's going to be kind of for most consent things, just make sure we kind of check that they are indeed able to consent, but then, yeah, sure, no problem. Our next one, policy 510, this is on mandatory reporting. I actually just was on the phone with a crew member last night who was dealing with some mandatory reporting issues. And what I did while I was on the phone with them was I pulled up policy 510. So then I'd have all of the kind of resources in front of me that I could communicate to the crew member. So these policies are actually very helpful. But if we take a look at the policy itself, first off, congratulations, you're a mandated reporter. Hopefully you already knew this, but that is you. Some things that we're specifically looking for as mandated reporters is abuse, neglect, and then domestic violence and things like that. So sexual assault as well. The county just did a huge education thing on strangulation in 2022, specifically saying that strangulation is different than choking and that this is impeding circulation of blood. So I can strangulate you with 2 fingers pushing into 2 carotid arteries. When we see strangulation, this gives you at the very end a whole bunch of kind of signs and symptoms of strangulation. So specifically any things around the neck are also like petechial hemorrhage around the eyes, or kind of that the dots of hemorrhage. We see it specifically in the mouth and the sclera as well. But just the county really wants us to be able to recognize strangulation, probably because they're seeing a lot of it within the county, which is unfortunate. But that's one other thing that we're seeing. For sexual assault, if we have sexual assault victims, there is a specific hospital designation that in Santa Clara County, we call it SAFE hospitals, SAFE, Sexual Assault Forensic Examiner. You may have also heard of SANE hospitals, Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner. We're moving to a safe hospital just because it sounds weird when we say, oh, let's take this patient to a sane center. And it's like, would you take me to an insane center otherwise? So safe center is just a good acronym to use. And we'll talk about which hospitals are safe certified in just a second. Anytime that we see any of these signs of abuse, neglect, violence, we need to know kind of factual objective signs. So I'll go ahead and give you the example from last night. A crew arrived taking a patient back home. When they got home, there were about 15 children of varying ages that didn't look related. It looked very disoriented, confused. The house was very, very messy. And the provider just got intense vibes of potential, what's the word? What's the term? Trafficking. And we have no idea if that was trafficking or if that was just kind of the local house where a bunch of kids are dumped. There were a couple other things in there they saw as well. But that's not our job to try to do the investigation. It's our job to say, hey, I saw something and it made me feel weird, and here were the factual things that I found. So unfortunately, intuition, that doesn't count on this. It's the house was dirty. There were multiple kids that seemed unrelated. The kids were confused. The parent was yelling at them, kind of all of these little things. If we see that, and what I directed these crew members to do was we have a ton of resources. So for Child Protective Services, there are these 2 phone numbers that we can use. There's also a physical form as well. For Adult Protection Services, so that's adult and abuse, anyone 18 up through 120. There's some phone numbers. There are also so many of these vehicles just out and about in Santa Clara County that they can show up a lot like police. And then there are also a whole bunch of resources, not for us, but to give to families or victims of abuse as well. So that's kind of a great resource if you're ever in this situation. So again, that's policy 510. And anytime that we see abuse, we have 48 hours, so 2 days to report that. And not business days, just 48 hours. So now we graduate into the 600s. So we're looking specifically here at field pronouncement of death. So they always say, BLS, we can't call time of death. Well, yeah, we can. There are 5 situations where we specifically can. So if the patient has a DNR and then expires, if there is any non-survivable injury, so decapitation, total incineration of the body, separation of major organs, the heart, the lung, the liver, the brain, if the patient goes into rigor mortis, resting lividity, that's when kind of the blood pools at whatever is the lowest geographic area of the body. That one's not specifically mentioned in the county policy though, which is why it's in parentheticals. And then last one is that putrefaction or decay of the body. If we're at the patient's home, then fire or police, either one, will have jurisdiction. If we're out in public, police will have jurisdiction. And then if we are in a skilled nursing facility or a care home, the care home, they will have jurisdiction and they will take the proper steps afterwards. So that's really all that's in this policy. We kind of look through here. So obvious signs of death. So they have decapitation, total incineration of the body, decomposition, rigor mortis, and then total separation or obvious destruction of major organs. We also have that DNR. In Santa Clara County, we also have this policy 619, end of life option. And so that's essentially, think of it like physician-assisted suicide, with a lot more nuances and codified, but that's just another thing that is we do in Santa Clara County. So when we're looking at ALS personnel, they have a couple other things they can do. We're not ALS. I don't believe any of you guys are paramedics or advanced EMTs. So on there, don't worry about that piece. But if we have seen any of the 5 that BLS can see, stop CPR. If someone is still en route to the scene, cancel them. Start treating the actual patients now, so the family and the bystanders, and then make sure you completed your PCR, notify the appropriate authorities, and then once they have arrived and taken over the scene, then we'll go back into service. We'll talk in a second if the patient dies en route to the hospital, what to do. But essentially, we can either continue to the hospital, we can stop at the closest ER, or we can return back to scene. So we get to choose, but we'll talk about that specific policy later on. Now we have policy 601, physician at scene. This policy is different than one that's going to come up quite a bit later, which is a surgeon at the scene. Physician at the scene is when you're doing your normal thing, and then all of a sudden someone walks up and they say, hello, I'm a doctor. Let me help. And it's like, whoa, okay, you're not supposed to be here, but sure, I guess if you want to help. That's fine. However, we are always going to be under our medical control and Dr. Miller's policies. So the licensed physician, they're welcome to join our team, but they can't say, all right, cool, I'm going to hold the leg. Here's a bone saw. Can you chop it off for me? Like, no, well, that's okay. I'm a doctor. I'm giving you authorization. Doesn't work. Sorry, I'm not licensed by Dr. Miller to chop off limbs, so I can't do it anyway. When we're looking at the actual policy, what we're going to see is, so first off, you're a doctor. What does that mean? Did you major in philosophy in doctorate school? Because a PhD is not what we need. We specifically need a California licensed MD or DO. If you're not California licensed, if you're not an MD or DO, thanks for playing. You can watch over there. If they are licensed, then they need to provide their license number and documentation to prove that to us. And then they kind of get to choose, well, okay, what do you want to do? Because if you want to come in and join the team, then you're going to be the team leader. And then we have a funky thing with transfer of care, and that you can't really transfer to someone lower than you can. Unfortunately, though, or actually fortunately, in Santa Clara County, physicians can relinquish care. To do that, though, so we're always going to be so care is still under the EMS medical director and base hospital physician. But the physician itself that was working on the scene is going to remain responsible for the care provided until another physician at the receiving hospital accepts the patient. So essentially, if something happens to the patient when the physician has let go and we transport to the hospital, it's still under that physician's license as opposed to the medical director's license. So typically they don't do that. So on there, you can assist in patient care, but at the same point, no one likes a backseat driver. So on there, if you assist, you're going to be assisting underneath whoever is the EMS patient care director. Or you can come in and you can manage the patient care and then transport with the patient to the hospital and then deliver the patient there. We see that a lot when we have physicians on our helicopters, and the helicopter policy is going to mention this policy as well. If the physician tells us to do something and we don't think that's right, then we're going to immediately contact base hospital, and they're going to kind of be the arbitrator, the mediator, and decide. In the meantime, we'll do whatever is the most conservative action. And then in terms of documentation, we just need to document who they are, what they did, and then anything that happened because of that. So that's going to be this physician at the scene. We're going to do one more policy, and then we're going to take a change of gears. We're going to do a little quizzy quiz, and then we'll get back to the policies. We'll do that hopefully 3 times, just so that it isn't me talking the entire time. So policy 602, this is the one that has potentially 8 questions on it. This is massive. This is important. This will sink your ship if you don't know this particular policy. And there's a lot in here. We're looking at those 12 hospitals that we mentioned at the very beginning of today. So before we start there, I actually want to start somewhere else, which is looking at this picture through here, which is at JUVAIR. So JUVAIR is this emergency medical kind of resources. I had it logged in ready for us, but I guess it expired. So this is looking specifically at all of the hospitals in the county. So we have Stanford Hospital, El Camino, Kaiser, and all of the rest down on the left-hand side. And then they have emergency departments. Some of them have trauma. Some of them are stroke capacity, STEMI, and such like. And you can see that right now, most of the hospitals are green, except for Regional Medical Center right here, who is not accepting 911 ambulances into their stroke center. So if we're looking at this and you are arriving on scene to transport a patient to the hospital, one of the things that you're going to call, because you are not going to be looking at this in the field, is you're going to call dispatch. You're going to say, hey, unit 315 on scene, can I get a hospital status? And dispatch is going to look up onto the wall where they have this, and then they're going to say, all hospitals green except for Regional Medical Center, which is red for strokes. And you're going to say, cool, awesome. Then you're going to go and treat your patient. And then when you're treating them, you're going to have to decide at some point, okay, we're going to transport. And then you're going to have to decide, okay, well, to which hospital are we transporting? And you will know, hey, all hospitals are green. So I can go anywhere that I would like, except for regional for strokes. So if this patient was having a cerebral vascular accident, we cannot go to Regional Medical Center. We can go to anyone else though. So this red through here, it's specifically known as hospital bypass, and essentially goes on when hospitals are full, and that's going to provide an unsafe kind of APODs, ambulance patient offload delay. So if 1,000 people walk up to Regional Medical Center right now, they have to, by law, treat every single person who walks into their ER. But that's a lot if then they get 1,000 people walking into their ER and then 14 ambulances coming in too. And so what the county has put in is this hospital bypass policy where the hospital can say, hey, we are closing our doors to ambulance personnel, which they can legally do. They can't close their doors to normal people on the street, but they can close their doors to ambulances. So if they're on hospital bypass, it essentially says we as EMTs, we cannot transport a patient to this hospital. Now, there is a little bit more to that. which is this in extremis patient destination. So in extremis, in extreme circumstances, which means either a breech presentation or protruding limb during delivery, so an unmanageable childbirth, a visible external bleed that cannot be controlled by EMS personnel, so an uncontrolled bleed, the inability to ventilate adequately following the use of appropriate basic and advanced airway adjuncts, or an uncontrolled airway. So again, uncontrolled birth, uncontrolled bleeding, uncontrolled airway. If any of those three exists, that patient is in extremis. So we need to transport them to the closest hospital. But the hospital cannot be on internal disaster. So right here, no hospitals are on internal disaster. But if we look at this image here, St. Louis is on internal disaster, and you can see that it is marked as black. Santa Clara Valley Medical Center and O'Connor are also red, as well as Regional Medical Center. So those three hospitals are red. St. Louis is black. And what that tells us is that if we have an in extremis patient, I can take them to any hospital except for St. Louis. If I have a non-urgent patient, I can take them to any hospital except for VMC, O'Connor, really Regional Medical Center, and then St. Louis. Internal disaster is things like the hospital is literally on fire, or that they're not able to treat patients. So during this photo, all of the county hospitals, so VMC, O'Connor, and St. Louis, their server went down. So they could not do anything. They could not talk on the phone. They could not look up patient charts. They could not order medications. They could not open their medication cabinets. And they were getting ready to evacuate all three of these hospitals, which would have been a nightmare. Luckily, everything came back online, but I was able to snap this photo just to show you what internal disaster looks like. So that's kind of the first thing we want to talk about in this policy is just that in extremis, which I believe is a test question. But then also if they're not in extremis, if the hospital is on bypass, we can't go there. We have to find a new hospital. So now we're looking at all of the specific specialty centers. So for psychiatric patients, every single hospital in the county, luckily, is a psychiatric center, except for we have one hospital that's all it does. So Valley Medical Center's EPS, Emergency Psychiatric Services, that's all it does is psychiatric patients. And so that would be a great place to take any psych patients. The next one is trauma patients. So in a couple policies, we're going to go through policy 605. So it's going to be down here, pre-hospital trauma triage. And we're going to take a look at, okay, so what is a major trauma victim? And then what is not a trauma alert? If it is a major trauma victim, then we're going to go to Valley Medical Center or Stanford. So that's our two main trauma centers. And if you have this policy up at the very end, there shows kind of the so psychiatric facilities. You can see how every single hospital is a psych facility. For trauma centers, for both pediatric and adult, the only ones that are trauma centers are Stanford and Valley Medical Center. So we're going to have to memorize this chart in a second. We'll get to it, but just wanted to kind of bring your attention there. I'm going to try to kind of do as much as I can here. Then we have burn patients. We only have one burn center in the county, which is Valley Medical Center. So if our patient is a major burn victim, we got to go there. If VMC is on trauma bypass or hospital bypass, then we need to go to the closest burn center. So the closest burn center after this is St. Francis up in San Francisco. The closest burn center after that is UC Davis. They are not frequent. It's hard to get a lot of burn centers. Excuse me. So if it is a major burn and traumatic injury, then we're going to go to the closest trauma center as opposed to the burn center. For strokes, so we have a number of stroke centers in the hospital. And specifically, we have this, where is it? This primary stroke center, which is a good stroke center. It's a good primary, so a good first response. But then we have these comprehensive stroke centers. So that's going to be a much greater level of care. And if we're looking at stroke centers in general, every single hospital is a stroke center, except for the Palo Alto Veterans Administration. So the Palo Alto VA, the Veterans Hospital, that one's not a stroke center. I do not need you to know the differences between which hospitals are primary and which ones are comprehensive. In the field, you can always just take a second to look that up. So that's going to be our strokes. The next, sorry, there's actually some more things on strokes as well. We're going to go through a whole policy just on strokes. But so primary, comprehensive is really the better stroke center to go to. And so for the county, we use GFAST as our scale. So gaze, facial droop, arm drifts, speech irregularities, and then time. but time is just what time did it happen? So really there are 4 things that we can give points on. If our patient had gaze abnormalities, so check mark, 1 point, they had facial droop, 2 points, arm drift, 3 points, and speech irregularities, if they had all 4 points, we really want to go to a comprehensive stroke center. But if the transport time from right here to the closest comprehensive is greater than 45 minutes, I want to get them to a center first. And so we're going to go to just any closest stroke center, whether it's primary or comprehensive, does not matter. Additionally, if the patient has a 3 or below on the GFAST scale, we're just going to go to any stroke center. It does not matter primary or comprehensive. So that's going to be the big stroke transport criteria. Next one is that STEMI. So STEMI stands for ST elevation myocardial infarction. So if we're looking at a normal heart rate, we have the P wave, then down for the Q, R, S, and then the T wave. And that's normal. That's what it should look like. With an ST elevation, so we have the S down here, and then the T, and then that ST segment is this guy right in there. If that's elevated, what we're going to see is that our thing kind of looks like this. And if someone has a cardiac waveform that looks like that, I know they're having a heart attack, 100%. And it's called a STEMI. They can also have an N STEMI, which is a not ST elevation, but it still is a myocardial infarction, which means they look like this one, but they're still having a heart attack. And that takes lab results to really test. As an EMT, I don't have a cardiac monitor. And so any patient that kind of looks like they're having a cardiac event, as BLS, we're going to treat them as STEMI patients. We're going to call a STEMI alert, and we're going to go to a STEMI hospitals. And most of the hospitals are STEMIs. We are missing the Los Gatos and the Palo Alto VA, Regional San Jose, and St. Louis. So the Palo Alto VA, really, they only are an emergency room and the psych. So that's easy to kind of get them out. Los Gatos, that's really far into the hills on the west coast of the county. Same with St. Louis, way down south. So those are kind of the 2 extreme hospitals. And then lastly, Regional San Jose, they've just been dropping departments like flies. They've just recently tried to drop their emergency room, which luckily California has blocked, but they're still they dropped their labor and delivery, they dropped their trauma. It used to be a really well-equipped hospital. It's now not. So that can explain kind of why Regional San Jose is no longer a STEMI center. Every other hospital is a STEMI center, though. And that, I believe, is going to be tested as well. So that's going to be your STEMI alerts. So really anything with a STEMI concern, anything with cardiac, we're going to a STEMI center. And that includes ROSC as well. So if we had a heart attack, cardiac arrest, and then it came back, great, awesome. Now we're going to go ahead and take them still to a STEMI. For pediatric patients, we're going to go over the routine pediatric care. But the big thing to know is that a pediatric patient is anyone less than 15 years of age. So it's not 18, it's 15. So that's going to be who qualifies as our pediatric patients. And then on there, we're going to transport them to a pediatric receiving center. It can be either an advanced one or just a general one, that's fine. We just want to make sure we go to a pediatric equipped center. There are some special circumstances on this policy. So if we have 1 million patients that all of a sudden come up like that, we're going to overwhelm our local hospitals. And so in that event, the county duty officer or duty chief, and then the base hospital physician, they're going to determine, okay, this hospital goes to this place, and they're going to kind of play the part of air traffic control. Generally, we do not go out of county for emergency patients. They very well might direct you out of county, or they could also pull out of county mutual aid into Santa Clara County. And that's fine if we get directed to do anything by either the duty chief or the base hospital. Sure, absolutely, we will do that. In terms of Stanford, Stanford has 2 emergency rooms. One is only for pediatrics, one is for adults. If we have an adult patient, take them to the adult ER. If we have a pediatric patient, take them to the pediatric ER. The only thing is if we have a pregnant patient who is after 20 weeks of pregnant and in active labor, we're going to go to pediatrics. So we will not take them to the adult ER. Out of county, we generally don't do unless it is a prearranged, which WestMed does a ton of, but if it is an emergent patient, we want to keep them in county. That is most likely purely due to finance, in that the county wants to get paid for the patient. alas, that's part of our protocol. So even though it's might not be what the patient wants to do, we really need be significant justification to take them out of county. In terms of destination changes while transporting, so let's say that we're transported to Valley Medical Center and we arrive at VMC, and VMC is not a hospital bypass. They're green, but we arrive and there are like 15 ambulances sitting outside of that hospital, and our patient is complaining of toe pain. So we know our patient is not a priority. We know that they're probably going to be sitting for a while in this hospital. We still, unfortunately, need to stay at that hospital. So if we have arrived on the property of an acute care hospital, we need to transport care to that hospital. We can't do is say, oh, wow, this hospital's busy. Let's go to O'Connor down the street. The reason why it's in this policy is because they do not want us to arrive on hospital kind of center and say, oh, wow, this hospital is busy. Let's go to another hospital. And then leave that hospital and then halfway to the next hospital, have our patient decompensate, code, or do something like that. That's the reason why they put that in. Could also be a money thing as well. The hospital wants to get paid. If that hospital is not able to transfer care within 20 minutes, though, they have now violated policy. And we'll talk about policy 622 at the very end. So they have 20 minutes to transfer care. If that doesn't happen, that's a problem. Now on there, generally it's going to be a not issue for the hospital. It's going to be an issue for us, though, because we're going to be sitting for hours outside of the hospital, and that's harder. So the next one is if the patient, this is what we talked about a little bit earlier, if we get halfway to the hospital and the patient says, you know, actually, scratch that, I do not want to go to the hospital. Please let me go. Okay, all right, first, are you mentally competent? Do you have the ability to consent or refuse? If you do, okay, so we're gonna try to convince you to continue, but if you decide, no, get me out, great, no worries. We're going to stop the ambulance as soon as it's safe to do so and permit the patient to leave in a safe location. So on there, we are not going to let them go on the side of the highway. We are not going to let them go in a dangerous area. We are going to drive them off the highway to whatever is closest. We are not going to drive them back home. We're not going to continue towards the next hospital. If we do continue to the hospital, that could be seen potentially as false imprisonment. If we do not let the patient out of the ambulance till we get to a safe area, that is not false imprisonment. So false imprisonment needs to be for an appreciable amount of time. Getting to a safe area does not count. But on there, just make sure that that you do talk to the patient, make sure they have the ability to consent and that they really do want to get out. And then we'll make every effort to make the patient safe and transport them or not transport them. If we're coming from county jails, the jail determines the hospital. Generally at Santa Clara Valley Medical Center, although especially for like high profile cases, they might choose different hospitals as well. We just need to kind of do whatever. If we're transporting to VMC and then we get a notification from dispatch, hey, all units, please be advised, VMC just went red and we're not yet on the hospital property. Cool, awesome. Then we need to divert somewhere else. Usually deputies are great if we kind of all of a sudden change directions. They know that something else is happening. So just kind of let that happen. In terms of incidents occurring at acute hospitals, so if let's say a patient gets injured at Valley Medical Center, let's take them to VMC, unless that hospital is not accepting emergency ambulance patients, in which case then we'll take them somewhere else. If the patient is a veteran, please take them to the Palo Alto Veterans Administration. If that is not applicable, so for instance, if that patient needs a STEMI, has a stroke or something, we can't go to the hospital because it's not an appropriate facility. So then we'll go somewhere else. In terms of ventricular assist devices, these are little pumps that come off of someone's ventricle, pumps through an inline pump into the aorta, and so kind of keeps the blood moving even though someone's heart is failing. If someone has this bad, the only hospitals that are authorized to treat these patients is Kaiser Santa Clara and Stanford. Oops, I just lost people. All right, so hopefully those two hospitals are able to be attended to. I lost the video for people. Are you guys still here? Is this still working? Oh, okay, cool, awesome. I got video back.
Still here.
Okay, cool, awesome. I just wanted to make sure. All right, so for VAD centers, we just got to go to Kaiser Santa Clara or also to Stanford. Last one here is that SAFE center. So sexual assault forensic examiners, also SANE as well, you may have heard of too. Both of those we just want to take to, there are a couple of them actually. Let me show on here. So our SAFE centers is going to be St. Louis Hospital, Stanford University Hospital, and Valley Medical Center. So those are the 3 hospitals we can take them to. So before we get into this chart, I want to start up here. So this is the ID, the 3-letter ID code for hospitals, which we do need to know. Most of these are pretty simple. So Los Gatos, we're going to look at Los Gatos Hospital, LGH, so Los Gatos Hospital. We also have El Camino Mountain View. So this was the kind of original El Camino. It's on El Camino Street. El Camino Hospital, ECH. Below that is Good Samaritan Hospital, GSH. For Kaiser San Jose, this is the only funky one. It used to be St. Teresa Hospital or Santa Teresa Hospital, one of the two. And so we can see STH for the Santa Teresa Hospital, even though now it's Kaiser San Jose. It probably should be changed to KSJ because Kaiser Santa Clara is KSC. Haven't made the change yet, lower priority, I guess. So it's still there as STH. So that's the only funky one. O'Connor Hospital, OCH, Palo Alto, VA. I always think it should be PVA for Palo Alto, VA, but it's Palo Alto to PA and then Veterans Administration. That's the PAV. Regional San Jose, so Regional Medical Center of San Jose, RSJ. SLH, the St. Louis Hospital. So St. Louis Regional Medical Center, that's the one that's way down south in Gilroy. And then we have Valley Medical Center, that's the primary hospital of the county. And then Stanford University Hospital, SUH, so Stanford Healthcare. Again, that's the one with the pediatrics and adult emergency room. So those acronyms are ones that you should be familiar with. The only funky one is the Kaiser San Jose. But then if we're looking at the, essentially the, specialties that every hospital is equipped to deal with. Let's start off with psychiatric facilities. That's everyone. Everyone is a psych center, so we can go ahead and get rid of that. Next one is, and then we can also say EPS is only a psych center, so forget about EPS. Then we're looking at emergency departments, and that's going to be every single hospital, again, other than EPS. That's all that the VA is. So forget about the VA. Then we're looking at stroke centers. So stroke centers is every single hospital except for the aforementioned 2. So Palo Alto VA and then EPS. In terms of that primary and secondary, don't worry, or primary and comprehensive, don't worry about differentiating those 2 for this test. So then it gets a little bit more complicated. So let me start with the burn centers. So there's only one burn center, and that's Valley Medical Center. So Valley Medical Center is it's a, they have residents at it. It's a great hospital. It's the county hospital, so that one in O'Connor and St. Louis. The county's right now trying to rescue Regional San Jose, so trying to purchase that one, but that's being blocked by the, I don't know, some union somewhere. But anyway, VMC is our burn center. In terms of our trauma center, so we have adult and pediatric, and we only have 2, which is Stanford and Valley Medical Center. So those are our 2 kind of major hospitals. Stanford is also a teaching hospital, but both of these are level 1 trauma centers as well. When we go into an advanced pediatric receiving center, we're going to add in the Kaiser Santa Clara. So this hospital is actually quite well equipped. You can see at the Comprehensive Stroke Center, which is awesome, STEMI, of course, but it has that Advanced Pediatric Receiving Center. And the other thing that it has that's really funky is that VAD center. So that one and Stanford are the only 2 VAD centers in the county. So that really now only leaves us with the STEMI centers that we need to know. So STEMI centers, again, these are going to be, so not EPS and not the Palo Alto VA, because we already got rid of those 2. And then not Regional San Jose, because Regional San Jose, they're getting cheaper and they're just kind of taking out their departments one by one. Additionally, it's not St. Louis Hospital because that's way too far south, and not Los Gatos Hospital because that's way too far west. That's how I think about it, at least. So every other hospital is a STEMI center. And that's all that you're going to need to know on here. So on that list, emergency departments, burns, strokes, STEMIs, trauma, pediatrics, and psychiatrics and VAD. The others are good to know, but on there you can also look that up later on if you have those patients. So that is this policy. It comes with its own kind of Schedule A. And the Schedule A has a map of essentially the county and then the trauma centers. So Stanford University is up here in Palo Alto by that dot, and that's Stanford University Hospital. Valley Medical Center is under the E and W through here. So it's just essentially when 280 meets 880, which turns into 17. So it's right in kind of this intersection area. So if you are south of this red line, so I-880 and Saratoga Avenue, you're going to go to Valley Medical Center every single time. If you're north, you're going to go to Stanford every single time. If you're online, you're going to pick, but that's just going to be something that you're going to see when you're out in the county itself. Is it really does matter exactly where you are, and that's just essentially a divvying up patients so that we're not overwhelming. So that is all of this policy 602. All right, so our next policy is policy 604, do not resuscitate, and other advanced directives. This one is a fairly simple policy, and it is self-explanatory. If someone has a DNR, we don't want to do CPR on them. For DNRs, they can come as either a form, and they have to have the California EMS agency seal on the top left. So for instance, we have the County of Santa Clara seal on the top left of this paper. For the DNRs, they need to have the California EMSA. If you are a resident of Texas and you decide to move to California for a weekend, for a trip, and you bring along your Texas DNR, you do not have a DNR in the state of California. So you do not have a DNR for that weekend. So what you should do, just like if you visit a foreign country and you need to get a visa, is you should have your physician contact the California EMS agency, get a California DNR for your trip, and then go to California with that DNR. We also have California DNR medallions. So we have one necklace and one bracelet that you can have in the state of California. For all of these, what they're going to have is a phone number and a patient ID number. And you're going to need to call the phone number, give them the patient ID number, and make sure that it is actually a valid DNR in the state of California. So that's just another thing that we need to do. And that comes down to procedure. So if the patient is alive, establish code status. Talk to them. Hey, do you have a DNR? Do you not have a DNR? If they have a DNR, cool, let me just take a look at it. I do not need to take a look at it if we're transporting between hospitals, clinics, nursing homes, doctor's office, or any of that, and I can see it on their medical record. So if I'm at a hospital and on the computer workstation, they show me, hey, they have a DNR on file, I do not need the physical one. For me, I prefer to have it. So I'm always going to have the hospital just print one out and give it to me, just so then I don't accidentally commit murder. And that's just my own thing. I don't want to bet my license on any particular patient. But if the patient does have a DNR, make sure that you look through it and make sure it's fully filled out. So once we've established whether they are a full code or no code, then we're just going to kind of wait. And if they happen to go unresponsive, we're not going to do CPR, but we're going to do everything else. If right before they go unresponsive, the patient says something to the effect of, save me, do CPR, I revoke my DNR, kind of whatever, cool, awesome, that counts, that's valid. So if they state that he wishes or she wishes resuscitation measures, we're going to ignore the post or DNR. Again, document is huge, so make sure you document all of that. But the patient's wish comes first. If they have a DNR and the family, for instance, says, do CPR, DNR comes above family because DNR comes from the patient, not the family. If there is any weird form or something funky, then we're going to contact base hospital for direction, and whatever they say, that's going to be how we move on from there. In terms of the only things we are not doing if someone has a DNR, chest compressions, defibrillation, assisted ventilation, intubation, and then ALS is going to do some, or not do some other things. We are still going to give them oxygen. We're still going to give them medications. We're still going to, well, we aren't, but if paramedics will do IVs, airway stuff, kind of whatever needs to happen. And then the only thing other in terms of the transport is that we're not going to drive code 3. So we're not going to drive with lights and sirens for that DNR patient. Once resuscitation is withheld, now we have to decide, kind of based upon location, who has the authority. So if we're in public, then it is the local public safety agency that is going to have authority. If we're at home, and this is that quiz question from earlier, it's going to be either local police or fire that are going to take the jurisdiction. If we're at a residential care facility, that facility will make arrangements. If we are en route when the patient expires, we can do one of three things. We can either continue transporting to that prearranged destination, we can return to the point of start, or we can also transport to the closest emergency department. So we can kind of go wherever. It does not really matter. Just communicate your intentions. And if the hospital is expecting us, make sure we let them know, hey, we're not coming with a live patient, so don't worry about that. So it's going to be this DNR policy. The next one, this is another kind of big one, potentially 5 questions, and this is that pre-hospital trauma triage policy. So on here, and this is also, or excuse me, this is another big one that is funky because most of this is the national protocol, but there are some slight deviations from whatever you you learned in EMT school and what the CDC kind of puts in as high-risk patients. Most of this is the same though. So penetrating injuries proximal to the elbow and the knee. So if they have rebar going through their chest, great, awesome. Skull deformity or suspected fracture, awesome. Spinal injury with new sensory motor loss, chest wall instability, pelvic fracture. This one though changes. So this is a suspected fracture of 2 or more, but they specify proximal long bone. So in the CDC trauma triage, it says 2 or more long bones. So if I break my forearm cleanly in half, that's my radius and my ulna. So on there, that would count. In Santa Clara County, we need either 2 humeruses or a humerus and a femur, or 2 femurs. But that's it for that particular one. This one, though, is the same as the national. So crushed, degloved, mangled, or pulseless extremity, an amputation proximal to the wrist or ankle. Anytime we need to use tourniquet or pack a wound, and that's all kind of the red high risk but injury patterns. For the mental status and vital signs, so if the motor GCS is less than 6, so not the entire GCS, but if the patient is unable to follow commands, if their respiratory rate is too slow or too fast, or needs support, or has a pulse oximetry less than 90%. Additionally, for blood pressure, for pediatrics, we're always going to use the formula 70 plus 2 times the age in years. And so that's going to work up until that blood pressure gets to 90, so 10 years old. And then we're going to just say anyone less than 90, that's going to be a problem until we get to 65. So if you're 65 and older, we're going to bump that up to 110, because a lot of times with our geriatric patients, we see that despite the fact that they're below 110, but above 90, they're still in shock. So that one is something that I would just put an asterisk next to. And then additionally, if they're over 10, if that heart rate is greater than the systolic blood pressure, which I love tricks like that, that just tells us the heart rate is trying to compensate for a falling blood pressure, which should not be the case. We have a couple of these moderate risks of mechanism of injury. So this is the yellow. So this is something that would not necessarily make it just that a critical kind of trauma patient, but that we would still want to treat the injury and then potentially see if there is any of this red criteria to get us the trauma alert. So partial or complete ejection, any intrusion greater than 12 inches on the occupant side or 18 inches anywhere else. So if there's a steel frame and someone crashes into it and that bends in from where it was to where it is now, if that's 12 inches and I'm sitting next to it, or 18 inches anywhere in the car, that would fit. If someone dies, if there's an unrestrained child, or if the child's in an unrestrained car seat, that's going to fit this. The vehicle telemetry data consistent with severe injury. So if you walk up and it's like, wow, this car is really beat up, or if they went over a cliff or something like that, that just tells us, hey, this is not a good one. If a rider was separated from the vehicle, so if they were thrown from a horse, all-terrain vehicle, motorcycle, whatever, but with significant impact. Anyone who's rolled over, or the car rolled over and they were not seat belted, if a cyclist was thrown with significant impact, or, and this is going to be one that is different from national, and I would also put an asterisk next to this, if someone falls from greater than 10 feet, and that's all ages. In the national protocol, the CDC, they say for adults, it's a bit higher of a number. And then for children, it has to do with the child's height. Not in Santa Clara County, 10 feet for all ages. And that's another kind of know that particular number. There's some other things as well. The biggest one is just EMS judgment. If you think that they're more injured, give them a trauma alert. And then also if they're pregnant beyond 20 weeks, then we want to make sure to transport them to not just the trauma center, but also labor and delivery. If they're in cardiac arrest, though, the fetus might not be. And so on there, that's just kind of an extra, be aware of that and then transport as soon as you can. All of these, if they fit, we're going to go to a trauma center. If they're not trauma alerts, we can still transport them as a trauma if we have that provider judgment. But otherwise, if they are not deemed trauma alert, then we're just going to go to any hospital. Pediatrics who are not deemed trauma alerts need to be only transported to pediatric receiving centers. And then it talks about the burns. So if someone has a major burn, so that's defined as either a partial thickness burn greater than 10%. So 10%, roll of nines, an entire arm and a little bit of the chest, or the anterior aspect of the arm and a little bit of the chest and the other arm here. So if someone is, I don't know, praising the sun and they get sunburned and blistered as well. Additionally, any burns include so this is partial or full thickness, they include the face, hands, feet, genitalia, perineum, or major joints. And then this one is different from the national protocol. Any full thickness burns for all ages. So if there is charring, if you're seeing muscle underneath, if you're seeing kind of, I don't know, a really thick bone, maybe it's going to be a major burn. It also says under here, and I kind of laugh about this, electrical burns, including high voltage greater than 1,000 volts. 1,000 volts has nothing to do with injury potential. It's all about the amperage. So static electricity is typically in the tens of thousands of volts. That's not needing to go to a burn center. And so on there, this is really looking at if this is a high voltage transmission line. So something with 100 amps, 10,000 amps, or something that's going on a power pole, but not necessarily 20 amps coming out of the wall in most homes. Chemical burns as well as in here, especially if they get into eyes, polyp contacts, inhalation burns as well, and then anyone who has a pre-existing condition. So if their major burn criteria, we're going to go to Valley Medical Center. We're going to go to a burn center. If Valley Medical Center is closed, we're going to go to St. Francis as well. If they meet the burn criteria and the trauma criteria and Valley Medical Center is closed, we're going to go to Stanford. So then we still get that trauma in. We can deal with the burn later on. And yeah, so closest trauma center to the incident. And that's going to be this policy. So specific things that I would know about this policy is just all the ones that we kind of asterisked. And then also on our quizzy quiz, I have a couple questions as well that will kind of lay you out and hopefully get these 5 questions in. In terms of this one, so policy 606, pre-hospital transition of care. So specifically saying if, let's say, the fire department arrives first and there's a paramedic on the engine, they start treating the patient, they decide, yeah, they need to be transported. And then an ALS ambulance arrives, and then the fire medic needs to transfer it to the medic, or the ambulance medic. That outlines that one. Additionally, if we have any paramedic and we request a flight crew, the weird one, though, the one that we're going to focus on, though, is if a paramedic has already treated a patient or assessed the patient, and they would like to transfer care down to an EMT. This happens a lot if it's a paramedic EMT partner situation, and we say, hey, actually, this is not an ALS call. Let's run it as a BLS call. Or also, if there just aren't a lot of units, we would want to have the paramedic on the fire engine be able to have a BLS unit, like many of WestMed units, be able to transport the patient. This is also talking about the pre-hospital provider to the hospital personnel as well. We already went over that policy on the Ringman report. So this is just looking more at the actual kind of care. So let's go ahead and let's pull up this policy. And let's go through it. All right, so paramedic to paramedic, the biggest thing is just work cooperatively. Yay! Everyone writes a PCR because both of you guys were dispatched. Paramedic to ALS flight crews. So the ground paramedic, they're going to provide the written verbal report, and then they're also going to determine the destination for the air ambulance, except for if the air ambulance decides, nah, that doesn't look safe, we're going somewhere else, they can always change that. But an ALS flight crew, they're going to do the verbal care to the hospital itself. The funky one, though, is paramedic to EMT personnel. We're going to see a whole nother policy just on this later on. So essentially, the kind of spark notes of this is every single patient needs to be assessed. And if you have a paramedic, they need to be assessed at the ALS level. If that assessment has been completed and the paramedic has determined the patient does not require ALS interventions or continued care, cool, awesome. So that's one constituent. And then also, if and I'm going to phrase this differently than the policy has it written, but this is the kind of thing I'm looking at, is there cannot be any ALS level procedures that have been performed on the patient. So for instance, if the paramedic sticks in an IV and gives some medication and then says, great, now the patient is stable, I cannot transfer that down to a BLS provider, except during MCIs. And this, I believe, is also going to be a quiz question. So on there during MCIs, absolutely give that to BLS, get them out of there, get patients to the hospital, not on scene. But typically, if we're doing ALS to BLS, we have to assess at the ALS level, we have to determine there is no ALS, and then we can transport it down. But if there is anything ALS, then this has to be ALS. And once again, everyone gets a PCR. If we're doing the pre-hospital provider to hospital personnel, this gives a format. That's not really important. We just need to transport to RN or MD. We cannot provide or transfer care to anyone less than that. And if there is a delay to offload the patient, we're going to talk about the whole policy in just a second, or at the very end with 622. So that's going to be this ALS to BLS transition of care, but we're going to go over that policy later on. So now we have policy 607, non-emergency ambulance utilization in the 911 system. This is another policy that was just updated. So different piece of this was updated. I'll let you know the update. So essentially, this is WestMed. So WestMed is defined as a non-emergency ambulance. Because we are that private contractor, we're not the 911 provider for Santa Clara County. And there are a couple of differences between the 911 system and this BLS system, or the non-emergency ambulance system. One of the big things is that the 911 system, they want their money's worth from the county. And so they want to make sure that any emergency patient is treated by the EMS, the 911 system, and then they're able to be transported by them if possible. Additionally, 911 ambulances typically are staffed by paramedic and EMT, whereas non-emergency ambulances are often staffed with BLS personnel, so only EMTs. So we're going to take that example. So a BLS ambulance, let's say EMTs, but really it doesn't matter. If they arrive on scene and they realize, hey, we're dispatched for a patient who wasn't feeling good, but this patient is actually having a full-blown stroke, is actually very hypotensive, very, very sick. This is not a non-emergency patient. This is really a critical patient. So what we need to do is immediately contact 911, not by calling 911 because you're going to get CHP up in Vallejo, but by calling the county communications center with their back door, or by using your radio, and not on command 92, but on the EMS channel, contacting the county and getting a 911 response. If transport from wherever we are to the hospital, if that is less than 15 minutes, we can do it. That's fine. But if it is greater than that, then we need to request a 911 ambulance. And this does not count for DNR patients. Even if that transport time is greater than 15 minutes, we will still transport DNR patients. I think that's just because the system doesn't want to get flooded with DNR patients. So I'm not sure how ethical that is, but alas, that's how it is. So, and this is an error. This is changed. So if a 911 provider can transfer from scene to hospital within 15 minutes, then they shall, and we can do that with red lights and sirens. If we do that, then we need to get a county event number. And that's essentially, WestMed has our own run numbers, the county has their run numbers. We just need a county number for our call because we use lights and sirens. That's something that the county tracks very heavily. And then we need to get that from county communications to contact our dispatch, and then we can get it there. If we have a nurse on board, they can only operate at BLS level. And if we have a ALS first response crew, like a fire engine that shows up and there's a paramedic on the engine and they say, hey, this patient is critical and needs ALS, and you're a BLS unit, the paramedic from the fire department can grab their equipment, jump in the back of a WestMed ambulance with BLS personnel, and then the whole kit and caboodle can be transported to the hospital as a unit, and that's totally fine. Last thing the policy talks about is still alarms. So this is, WestMed oftentimes calls them like first on scene. And let's say you're driving on the highway and boom, there's a vehicle accident. Or if you're in the post aisle of Safeway and boom, someone collapses. You are first on scene and it's called a still alarm. So this policy, I don't know if there's anything more here. So if we go lights and sirens, anytime you turn on your red lights and sirens, except for to check out at face, we need a county event number. And we can be pulled into the 911 system. So if WestMed is pulled in, if county says, hey, WestMed, I need a couple ambulances, and we give the unit, that's fine. You will operate as a 911 ambulance. And on there, you will absolutely respond with red lights and sirens when dispatched from county communications, kind of whatever else you need. If we have a nurse, they're going to be an EMT for the day. And for still alarms, we just need to immediately contact county communications and request that 911 ambulance. So that's that policy. Then we're going to move to 609. So EMS system field management. So you get to learn about what my job is. So there are kind of two people that we're going to go through here. So the EMS field supervisor, a private ambulance company. So that's going to be Spencer and myself. And then there is the EMS duty chief of the county EMS agency. So we've already talked about the duty chief in terms of the system variances. If they happen at level A variance, we need to immediately get on the phone with the duty chief. We haven't really talked about Spencer and my role. So the duty chief, they're going to serve in a couple of capacities. So they're going to supervise, regulate, and manage all the contracted system providers. They are not going to manage other regulatory kind of authorities. So for instance, they're not going to have any jurisdiction over things like the police department, the fire department, I don't know, Caltrans or anything like that. But they do have jurisdiction over things like WestMed and contracted providers. They can also allocate countywide medical resources. So if we have a huge thing like COVID, they can send out a whole bunch of gloves, masks, vaccines, kind of whatever they need from the county kind of strongholds. They can also authorize emergency policy changes, and they can kind of operate through the county health officer and authorize and mitigate public emergencies. So that's kind of their big thing. They can also delegate roles, fill incident command system positions, and then delegate or be a delegate of the county health officer. So that's them. For me, what I am, I'm an agency representative. So when WestMed is being used, I can work with incident command or the EMS duty chief to coordinate any sort of WestMed response. What I can also do, so I can supervise the company, I can, and this is at any given point in time, I can suspend non-emergency company functions. So this is kind of where it gets scary. I'm not going to do this, hopefully. I've never done this, but on there, or I have done some of these, but if you're working on an interfacility transport and you have not yet made patient contact, and let's say WestMed gets a pediatric call, like from a NICU or something, I can call you up and I can say, hey, stop doing that transport. I'm going to put you on this higher priority call. I can also call you through. So dispatch, they are allowed to not give you a meal, but if they give you your meal time, you're gone. You're untouchable for 30 minutes. I can call you up and I can suspend your meal time and say, hey, I know you just got given a 30. I need your help. You're back in the system. I can also say, hey, I know you're getting off in 2 minutes. I need you to run another call for me. I need you to stay over. So we call that mandatory overtime. Dispatch, they can give you a call up until the last minute that you are on call. So if you work from 9 to 5, at 4:59 p.m., they can give you another call. At 5:02, I can give you another call and I can require you to stay behind. Spencer and I can. That's one I've never done before. I don't plan on doing it. Generally, I ask politely, and if you say no, then I respect you. But on there, the county gives me the authorization too. That's really all that this policy is for you guys. We need to cooperate with the county. If the county needs ambulances for low system levels or whatever, then we're going to try to ensure that the duty chief is kept informed of whatever happens, but then also assist with any other agency that needs help. That emergency status button, if that's been activated, that's also where we need to notify the duty chief if this is real. And then any failure of communications or things like that. This last one kind of is another cool point. So EMS duty chief, they're going to serve as a resource for the contracted and non-contracted ambulance supervisors 24 hours a day. So that means that you, as a system provider, you are not contacting the duty chief, it's only going to be Spencer, Aaron, and myself from West Med that can contact the duty chief. Our dispatch center, they just wanted to get the duty chief's number, and it was like, no, sorry, you need to contact us. We'll do it for you. But on there, if you need the duty chief for whatever reason, contact the on-duty supervisor, and then we can help you out with that. Oops, and I just jumped. All right, let's see. Let's do a couple more policies, and then we'll go back. Yeah, we'll do that after the 700. So we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more policies, and then we'll go back for our quizzy quiz. So this one is pretty simple. Hazmat and hazardous materials incidents. This is policy 610. And the biggest thing here is just if it's hazardous, that means it poses an unreasonable risk to health, safety, or materials, property, that's the one. If someone has been contacted by hazmat materials, they need to be decontaminated, and this needs to happen first. From that moment on, for the rest of the time through the hospital system, they are going to be put as a decon alert. So if you touched a whole bunch of plutonium and then we decontaminated you on scene, when you're going to the hospital, we're still going to tell them you are a decon alert. And that just kind of, even though you have been decontaminated, you could be suffering symptoms from the contamination. And also, were you really fully decontaminated? We don't know. We hope so, but on there, it's just something else that they're going to want to keep you as that decon alert. So if you are in a situation that involves hazmat, safety is always going to be the first piece. So isolate the area, deny entry to anyone else. Then we're going to establish command. And then if it is a hazardous material, we're going to try to identify it. Some ways that we can do that is by asking bystanders. That's a great way, especially if it's like a train or a truck or a plane or something like that. We can talk to the driver, and they should have either a manifest or a bill of lading that they can give us with all of the material safety data sheets. Additionally, I love when it says use binoculars. And it's like, well, does WestMed issue binoculars? Nope. Are you going to carry your own binoculars with you on a call? Like, probably not. So I have no idea how binoculars are functionally a part of this, but oh well. But do maintain a safe distance. Look for labels, placards, markings, and use your the dot guidebook. So the ERG, the Emergency Response Guidebook, the big orange book. They also have a phone app now as well. So private EMS providers, we're going to essentially just try to help out. We are not the hazmat teams at the county. So that hazmat team, they're going to be able to go into the hot or the warm zones. As EMS, we are not going into the hot zone, which is the area of direct contamination, or the warm zone, which is the area of decontamination. We're going to wait for those patients to be brought all the way out into the cold zone to us. So we're just going to kind of stay put. So only trained hazmat providers are going to decontaminate in the warm zone. Everyone else is going to stay outside in the cold zone. And then once the patients have been handed over to us, again, we're going to continue to call them that decon alert when we're talking with the hospitals. If we ourselves get exposed to hazmat, we take precedence over everyone else. So make sure to let incident command know and then get decontaminated, because your safety is more important than everyone else. So in terms of parking, if it is a small incident, they want you to park 100 feet away and keep bystanders 100 feet away. If it is a large incident, they want to augment that to 500 feet. On there, that's the only thing that the test is going to kind of give you. It's not going to give you a situation where you have to determine, is this small or large? It's just going to ask you about that parking. Next one, 611, EMS air resource utilization. So this is looking at helicopters. And we have a ton of helicopters that we can use in the county. Actually, let me scroll down to the bottom here, because it gives you all the 3 that are stationed within the county. And then we also have several that are stationed kind of outside of our area and even further away from that. But Stanford, we see a lot of, and then we have a CalStar that's anchored at Gilroy. And then we have a bunch up in Alameda County as well from CalStar and like Reach Air, Lifelight. So you have a bunch of helicopters that can be used in the county. Essentially, what this policy is looking at is if you, as an EMT, determine, hey, we need a helicopter at this scene, then you're going to need to contact your incident commander at the scene, and they're going to be able to request via county communications the need for air transport. County communications, though, they're the only group that can authorize the helicopter to operate within the county. So if you come to me and you ask your field supervisor or the duty chief, we absolutely can take that request, but we're going to go to county comms. We may not, cannot, and will not just call Stanford and say, hey, we need your helicopter out here. That's against policy. So the only, let's see, how do I phrase it? The only agency that can authorize helicopters at an emergency scene is county communications. From there, once there's a helicopter that's called, then we can go ahead and complete a build a landing zone. For that landing zone, we need to have it 100 feet by 100 feet. Let's see, where does it state that? Yeah, all right, so landing zone needs to be 100 feet by 100 feet or a circle with 100 feet in diameter. And then we're just going to kind of keep everyone out when the aircraft lands. Aircraft pilot, they're going to be the ones that have the jurisdiction. If they decide, oh, this isn't safe, they can always self-cancel. In terms of timing, it's going to take about 45 minutes or so to actually activate the helicopter. And then it's going to take anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes for that helicopter to fly to any part of the county. So it's going to take a lot of time. So in terms of when we are asking for an ambulance from the air, we're looking at specifically the transport time is too long. So there are some areas, I'm trying to find the specific, oh, it's way up here. Yeah, so for, oh no. Yeah, okay, so for Mount Hamilton and like Coyote Reservoir, those areas, they're just automatic. Dispatch is going to automatically assign a helicopter onto those areas, just because it's going to take the ground crew the same amount of time or more time to get to those areas than a helicopter. So whoever arrives first can cancel the other one. But then other times is if there is a patient that needs ALS, but there's no ALS that is able to be provided, so everyone's busy. Additionally, if the traffic situations make it more than about 45 minutes to get to the hospital and there is entrapment, or if the scenes themselves, the amount of patients that are there are going to overwhelm local hospitals, then we can go ahead and use those air ambulances. If your incident command cannot be reached to request the ambulance, then the duty chief or your field supervisor, we can authorize the activation. Again, though, we are going to contact county communications, and they're going to be the ones that actually authorize the helicopter. And air transport, we're considering only physiologic and anatomic criteria. So if it's just the injury, or the mechanism of injury and the let's see, how do they phrase that in the trauma triage? So the injury pattern. So we're not looking at this first part. We're looking at the mental status. We're looking at the mechanism of injury and the anatomic criteria. Oops. And then, yeah, greater than 45-minute transport time, or when the transport time plus the time on scene is greater than 60 minutes. The ground paramedic, they're going to decide the destination for the air ambulance, and they're going to give the ring down report to the hospital. So that's going to be this policy. For this next one, surgeon to the scene. We already talked about a physician at the scene, and that's if a physician just happens to be present and says, oh, I'm a doctor, let me help. This one is specifically looking at if a paramedic on scene decides, hey, we need to get a surgeon to the scene. So I'm realizing I forgot a part of an earlier policy. So policy 501, the last piece in here, which I skipped over, is base hospital contact. For base hospital, and actually there was another piece in here as well. Oops. Oh, I guess there's not. Okay, they just rewrote this policy. But for base hospital contact, only paramedics can contact the base hospital. So on there, we cannot, as BLS, EMTs cannot contact the base hospital and get medical direction. And so anytime that we're kind of seeing this base hospital consult must be made, it's looking at paramedics must be on the scene first. So for something that we know needs a surgeon to the scene, this is going to require base hospital consult. And so if I, as a BLS unit, arrived on scene and I said, holy cow, we need a surgeon, I need to first contact an ALS resource to get on scene and assess, and then they can contact the base hospital to get a surgeon to the scene. So it's very convoluted, but let's go ahead and let's take a look at this one. So this is 616. Here it is. So This needs to be done, though, with a patient who is medically salvageable. So the idea of this policy is if someone, and when I've done this before, it was a person who was like impaled, skewered on a fence. And there was no way that we were going to just cut the fence off and transport them. Like we really needed to like surgically pull the fence posts out of them. And that is not a part of my scope of practice. So we contacted a surgeon, and the surgeon came out to the scene and pulled the like fence pieces out. So if the patient was dead, we're not going to call a surgeon out to the scene. If they are somehow, and the patient would be considered medically salvageable if the entrapment were mitigated, then we can go ahead and call the surgeon out. We need to contact base hospital first, and base hospital has to agree, yes, we absolutely should contact we should get a surgeon out to you. And then just be aware that this is going to take a lot of time to actually get the surgeon there. So 45 to 60 minutes just for the response time, and greater than that. So if the condition exists, then the paramedic is going to contact the EMS duty chief. And the duty chief, they're going to immediately contact the base hospital and talk to them. And then the two of them are going to come up with, okay, which physician is available, and then can we make this happen? If the surgeon is available, then the EMS duty chief, they're going to go to VMC and they're going to pick up the surgeon and the anesthesiologist, and they're going to drive them to the scene itself. Once at the scene, the duty chief is the direct kind of authority over, has jurisdiction over. The surgeon reports directly to the duty chief, but the duty chief is underneath the incident commander. And the duty chief's job is essentially to be the surgeon's escort and safety team. So if the surgeon walks up and says, whoa, that's not safe, I'm not going in. Cool, awesome. They can self-cancel. But the duty chief needs to provide them with all of the PPE and such. From there, if they're on scene, then the surgeon shall not be placed in a dangerous situation. The EMS duty chief is going to serve as the guide, and they're going to. All right, I'm trying to find medical direction. So they're not going to be able. Yeah, here it is. So the surgeons may not provide medical direction to the first responders that exceed the scope of your level within Santa Clara County. So similar to the physician on scene, they can't tell you, hey, here's a bone saw, chop off their leg, I'll hold it for you. That's not part of your scope. So they can ask you to do things, but they cannot exceed that medical direction. And every single one of these will be quality assessed by the medical director. So that's this policy. All right, two more, and then we'll change gears. All right, and this one is a super simple one, super easy one, and very important one. So 617 gave us a headache a while back when the county was not actually printing these badges in a timely manner. So this is looking at exactly the process that we are doing right now. So EMS accreditation within Santa Clara County. So to operate within Santa Clara County, you must have your valid government issued photo ID on your body at all times, not on your phone, a physical ID card with you. Additionally, you must not only have, but display a Santa Clara County EMS system accreditation badge. It's always visible. So this is my badge. Oops, that's the back of it. So it has my photo, has all my information. This needs to be worn on my body all the time. So if it's visible right here, that's great. If it's fine. If I put a sweatshirt over this, though, it's no longer visible. So that doesn't count. So I see a lot of people and they kind of hang this on their belt. So then it's displaying underneath their jacket, uniform, kind of whichever, and that's fine. In terms of the application process, you guys already hopefully know about this. Get a account online, come take the test, fill out the full application itself, pay a fee that WestMed will reimburse after 90 days. And then, then on there, in terms of the expiration date, the expiration date of the badge, it will expire on the date of whatever your professional license expires, or after 2 years. And then additionally, yeah, here that is. And then additionally, the badge itself is owned by the county. And so if it is lost or stolen, that is a system variance report that you need to fill out. And then also if you leave the county for whatever reason to go off to a better grade or other things, you need to actually give the badge back to the county. For whatever reason, when it expires, they don't care about it. So that's cool. So I have a bunch of extra badges at my house. But on there for the active one, it needs to be returned back to the county. So big things are these first two is you need to have your ID with you. You need to have the badge with you at every given point that you are working and operating in the county. And then the last one that we're going to do before we change gears is 618, EMS life safety procedures. So life safety, this is your safety. This is your ability to say, hey, this is not safe for me to be on scene. Therefore, I'm going to skedaddle. I'm going to pull a Forrest Gump. I'm going to get off the scene. So EMS is risky. We know that. But on there, we can't provide more risk than is probable and predictable. So if you are the first unit on scene, your number one task is to establish command and be responsible for overall incident safety. So that means you're going to talk to dispatch and give them a CAN report. Conditions, what do I see? Actions, what am I going to do? And then needs, what do I need in terms of resources? If you're that first EMS unit on scene, you are the incident commander, and you're going to need to make that report. If you see any life hazard zones, so these are areas containing or possessing a condition that would likely cause serious injury or death if exposed to people. So for instance, falling power lines, energized equipment, collapse zones, large unprotected holes, a damaged pressurized vessel, explosives, hazardous materials, things like that. So if you do see the life hazard zone, you're going to mark it with 3 horizontal stripes of red and white barrier tape. With do not enter, do not cross on it. If you use yellow tape, that is not allowed. But if you happen to see 3 yellow tape kind of lines, consider it life hazard zone, even though it's not acceptable. Nobody can enter these life hazard zones at any time. Again, they're they're likely going to cause serious injury to the people who find it. And then if you discover a previously unrecognized life hazard zone, we just need to make sure you're safe and then mark it and don't leave the place until it has the full border around it. Always be looking out for your personal safety, especially things like sharps, bodily fluids, fuel leaks, unusual behavior, animals, self-locking doors, and other things there. Communicate that with dispatch and your partners. Always look out for your own escape route, so especially with things like self-locking doors. Make sure you can get out there. And then safety zones are different than the life safety hazards. This is an area that is safe, so like a rehab zone. This is in the cold area, but these safety zones, they should be established on scene by the incident commander, and they are staging or areas where you can kind of go and have safe refuge. In terms of your emergency vehicle positioning, as an ambulance, always on the highway, try to have it downstream of traffic after the incident, so that then you can have very quick egress. If you are the first vehicle on a highway scene, though, you need to position that as a physical barrier, so that then other vehicles, if they smash into that, they're going to hit the vehicle, but not you on the other side of the vehicle. So also be aware of which direction your wheels, your tires are turned. If you're parked right behind the incident, your wheels are going to have the thing roll directly into you. It's not a very good barrier because it's on wheels. So always turn the wheels so then if someone hits the ambulance, it's going to go off somewhere else where it's not going to hit you. If you have your ambulance set as that emergency vehicle providing that barrier, you may not load patients into that blocking vehicle. So just don't put a patient into the scenario where they are the first thing traffic is going to see. If the scene's already been protected, though, ambulances should be downstream. Use your emergency lights, use your floodlights as well. If we find imminent danger, so imminent danger is there is a real threat of safety right now, right this second. So for instance, if you're on scene, then you hear someone scream, "He's got a gun," or you see someone pull out a gun or something like that. This is a threat or a hazard that could reasonably be expected to cause imminent death or serious harm. So on there, make sure it's not like a squirt gun or something like that, like it's a true gun. On there, you need to get out if you're already on scene, or if you're not already on scene, stage, do not go into the scene. If you are dispatched to a mass casualty incident, active shooter, things like that, where it's still an active danger, you are not going to go to that scene. In fact, do not drive to the scene. Stay behind, stage, and then once they call code 4, then you know that it's safe to come in. So let's see, EMS personnel may not enter a scene where imminent danger exists. In terms of retreat from scene, so if you are on scene and you hear the "he's got a gun" or whatever, you are allowed to leave. You are allowed to retreat from the scene. If you do this, this is a variance. So immediately notify your EMS field supervisor as soon as possible. And we're going to notify the G chief because, again, this is a level A variance. You could have gotten harmed and you had to leave. Otherwise, you would have gotten harmed. Talks about law enforcement disengagement again. So again, no crime is in progress and no one is at risk. Then law enforcement can turn patients over to EMS without having to stay. In terms of risk refusal, this is if dispatch says, hey, I need your help with a mass shooter. If you could just go in and take care of them for me. And you're like, heck no, techno. I have the right to refuse unsafe working conditions. That sounds like an awful idea. I'm not going to do that. So you're able to refuse that assignment. That would just be considered a turn down. Anytime that happens, we need to investigate it to figure out why did someone just send you into an active shooter zone or something that was dangerous. And then personnel accountability reporting. So this is welfare checks. WestMed does welfare checks every 20 minutes. So just make sure every 20 minutes you're checking in with dispatch, just letting them know you're not dead in a ditch somewhere. This is specifically aimed at, or this portion of the policy is specifically aimed at things like mass casualty incidents or large scale events. And we essentially need to check to make sure that every single human being is accounted for. So this includes ride-alongs, this includes trainees, this includes patients and their families, and all responders. So essentially, we'll go on the radio and we'll go unit by unit and check to make sure everyone is okay. If this is going on, just make sure you're listening to your radio. And then when you get kind of called upon, just make sure that you tell us the status of all your patients and how many people you have with you. So when your unit receives a request for a PAR, visualize all personnel and then make sure they're safe and then let them know that they are accounted for. So yeah, pretty much that's it. This test shouldn't ask you details about the personnel accountability reporting, but if it does ask about the life safety procedures, life hazard zones, that's going to be a big thing, emergency vehicle positioning, imminent danger, and then the ability that you can retreat from scene. Okay, so now we're going to move to policy 700. So on the actual website, on the Santa Clara County website, if we go to our policy list, which is here, oops, nope, it's not here. EMS agency website, documents, policy manual, and if we scroll down to the 700s, we need to actually click into this policy. And then we get the adult protocol, so that's 700-A, and then the policy number. We have some optional scope ones as an X. Pediatrics have a P. Procedurals, so medical, I think of, has an M, and then standard protocols have an S. So that's kind of how they're organized, which is a little bit different than how you've seen before. So we're going to start with the adult policy for hypoglycemia. This policy was also just recently updated, and it's going to be super simple, 60 milligrams per deciliter. That's our number. If they are less than that number, and I'm going to turn on the light real quick. If they're less than that number, then we are going to give them glucose. If they're above that number, then they're fine. We're going to do routine medical care. So if they need oxygen, give them oxygen. If they don't need oxygen, then don't. But we're really going to do this based off of blood glucose level. For oral glucose, we can repeat at least or after 15 minutes if there is no change. If they have refractory hypoglycemia, that means that we give them glucose, they go up, and then they immediately go back down. This really should be an ALS call. We should get a little bit of D10 going or something there. That's really all this policy has on it, though. So 60, that's our number. Next one we've already talked about, strokes. So A13, if someone is having a stroke, so I just want to really quickly kind of point out, this policy talks about oxygen titrate as appropriate. Oxygen on a stroke patient is untoward. So that damage, that hurts stroke patients. It further kind of restricts the blood flow going to the brain, further reducing the oxygen to the brain. And so we really do want to try to reduce the amount of oxygen that we give or eliminate therapeutic oxygen. Now, if someone is also hypoxic, also needs oxygen, sure, absolutely, give them that. But I just wanted to kind of point out and put an asterisk next to, don't give a stroke patient oxygen because of the stroke for whatever reason, which doesn't really make sense, but a lot of providers do that inappropriately. So no oxygen for strokes unless they need it. Then we're going to complete the GFAST stroke screening and make sure they actually are having a stroke based upon this. So we're giving them points for their gaze, face, arm, and speech. And then if they know what time, or if we can figure out what time they were last seen normal, we want to record that. Then once we're pretty sure we have a stroke patient, let's start transporting. If we're within 45 minutes, let's go to the closest comprehensive stroke center, especially if they have a 4 or more. Or sorry, a 4, there isn't more. If they have less than a 4, or if they're greater than 45 minutes away from a comprehensive stroke center, let's just go to the closest stroke center. But without delaying transport, I also want to check, hey, are they actually having a seizure or a post-ictal phase? Do they actually have a low blood glucose level? If they do have a low blood glucose level, and I think that they're having a stroke, we're going to withhold oral glucose because I don't want them to choke on the glucose coming in. A lot of times swallowing is hard for people having a stroke. So on there, we will withhold oral glucose. That doesn't mean that a paramedic cannot treat blood glucose level intravenously. But on there, additionally, we want to place the patient in a supine position, but really at a low Fowler's position with the head elevated 30 degrees. That can hopefully pull some pressure away from the head, document as much as we can, and see if we can also take a person who knows when the patient was last known well, either take them with us or get their contact information for a reliable historian. From there, we're just going to do everything else normally. So provide the advanced notification and then transport them without delay to that specific stroke center. And that's going to be all that we can see for the stroke policy. Next one, this one is bizarre that this is something we have to go over, but we will, that's fine. Traumatic hemorrhage control. If someone is bleeding, put direct pressure on them, any wound. The indications for a tourniquet would be any type of external bleed that does not stop once we've packed the wound, and it has to be on an arm or a leg. In terms of packing, where is packing? On there, absolutely can pack wounds, just don't pack them in body cavities. So like the thoracic cavity, the abdominal genitourinary, or abdominal pelvic cavity, or cranial cavity. But other than that, try to use X-rayable gauze. Otherwise, just remember how many gauze pads you stuck into the wound, and then make sure to wrap it afterwards. The packing specifically works best for muscle. For tourniquets, once we apply the tourniquet, this specifically says that if it's been placed for over 2 hours, we can elect to slowly back off the tourniquet every 5 minutes. I would be very careful about that because I don't want to release cytokines back into the body without preparing the body for that. So I would definitely get an ALS personnel involved and potentially medical control. But on there in the policy, it gives us the right if we would like to. I really don't like to, especially because tourniquets, they won't at all come near amputations until we get to like the 20+ hour mark. But at the same point, if we're using a tourniquet, that could be really bad for the wound too, or for the limb. But at the same point, if we're in the territory of needing a tourniquet, they're a pretty sick patient. So get them to the hospital as soon as you can. And then, yeah, that's really all of it for non-compressible. So if we can't use a tourniquet because in like the groin area, we can use a trunk tourniquet, or we can use something else, or just hold direct pressure onto the bleed. But really just stop the bleed. If we cannot, then it is considered the in extremis patient. All right, this next policy, continuous CPR, this is funky. So in Santa Clara County, we do continual chest compressions. So no 30 to 2, no 15 to 2, continual compressions, which means if you are the only person on scene, you are not doing anything other than thumping on that chest. When you are doing the actual compressions, this is the funky piece, 110 beats per minute. On the test, you're probably going to get a question answer that says, ooh, 100 to 120. That's not right. It has to be 110 in Santa Clara County. Now on there, that doesn't mean it happens. If you want to see really great 200 beat per minute CPR, ask a Santa Clara County firefighter to do CPR in front of you. And man, it's like a jackhammer. It's crazy. But on there, we want 110. 2 to 2.4 chest depth, 2 inches for a child, 1.5 for an infant. That all stays the same. For ventilations, this is different because we're not doing a 30 to 2. So the ventilations, we're going to give one breath every 6 seconds for an adult patient and one breath every 3 seconds for a pediatric patient. That's going to be during your continuous CPR. So if you're alone, you can't give ventilations at all. So that's going to be your partner giving that breath. Don't time it to the compressions. Additionally, we're going to hold the first defibrillation for 2 minutes if we did not witness the CPR or the arrest. And we're going to make sure to place an automated CPR device before we move any patients. So pointing out all of these specific features of the policy. So 110 beats per minute, that's where it says it. Change providers every 2 minutes, just to make sure that happens. The depths are all the same. One breath every 6 seconds for an adult, one every 3 seconds for a child. And then it gives you a whole bunch of specific kind of roles and responsibilities for the compressor, the defibrillator, the ventilator, the coordinator. And then also if we have single rescuer, what are we doing? 2 rescuers, 3 rescuers, and so on. For the automated CPR device, make sure that we do apply it before we move a patient. We do not need to do it any earlier than that, and do not interrupt high performance CPR. So that's going to be the CPR policy. For this next one, ALS to BLS transition of care. We've already gone over this policy, essentially, not the specific policy, but we've already talked about when an ALS resource can transfer care down to BLS. And the same things are in place. So activation of mass casualty incident, that does change this policy. But at any point in an ALS assessment, there is a presence of ALS care. So that involves any of these items through here. So I would just, instead of memorizing, oops, sorry, I went too fast. Instead of memorizing all of these items, I would just essentially say if the patient is super sick, we cannot transfer ALS to BLS. Additionally, if the patient has received any ALS care already, we cannot transfer them to BLS. But if the patient does not have any of the above issues and there is no ALS that has been done, then we can always transfer down to a BLS provider. Additionally, if we're only a BLS provider and we see the above issues, instead of calling for a paramedic, if we are within 15 minutes to the hospital, then we can choose to, as a BLS unit, transfer that patient with red lights and sirens to the hospital. But if I'm greater than 15 minutes, then I really need to, greater than 15 minutes and I have these items, then I need to call for a ALS ambulance to come and help on scene. So that's really all that's there. In this slide, I put in all the specific things. Don't memorize those. Just say if they're sick, it's an ALS call. If it's an MCI, it can be transferred from ALS down to BLS. Otherwise, it really can't. All right, 2 more policies that are tested, and then just a couple that I want to talk about. So this one is the routine medical care for pediatric patients. We have one for an adult as well, but there's nothing surprising, nothing new out of this policy. We've already talked about how pediatric is defined as anyone who's less than 15 years of age. Anytime we get a patient that's pediatric, we need to get a GCS on every reassessment and every contact. We need to get blood pressure, heart rate, respiration rate, pulse oximetry. I need to get a temperature the first time I meet any of these patients, and I need to get a blood glucose level anytime that the patient is a suspected altered level of consciousness or diabetic or something like that. If I have any of these vital signs that are out of the normal, then I'm going to treat this as a critical patient. I'm going to need to reassess every 5 minutes. If the patient is stable, then they'll reassess every 10 minutes. So not 10 to 15, just 10 minutes in Santa Clara County. For things that I can do, if they need it, I can manage the airway. I can do whatever I need there. I can give oxygen specifically if they're less than 94%, then I can bump them up to 94. Just be careful with COPD. Typically that's an adult thing, not a pediatric thing though. I can BVM them, I can give them CPR. In terms of pain management, that's really going to be an ALS paramedic thing. There's not really a lot that EMS or BLS can do, but I can contact a ALS provider to come in for the purposes of pain management. Additionally, if the patient has medications that they are prescribed, I can assist with those prescription medications. So specifically things like nitroglycerin for adults, albuterol for children, any type of medication that is prescribed by a physician to the child. I still want to go through my 5 rights of medication administration to make sure that the medication is the right patient, that it is actually prescribed to this patient, right time, that it's been the appropriate timing in between. Right dose, them administering the right dose, right route, probably self-explanatory, right documentation. So just make sure that's all done, but then whatever the patient is prescribed, I can go ahead and give them. This does give, and this is something they added in this 2025 version, they gave a approximate heart rate, respiratory rate, blood pressure, and temperature scale for pediatrics. This isn't perfect, but this is a good reference to have. And that's really all that's there for that routine medical care. So get vitals, titrate oxygen above 94, bring all the medications with you to the ER, or if they need it, then we can assist with anything. If we do give pharmacological intervention, though, we probably should transport this patient. All right, last tested policy, this is 811. If you pull up policy 811, you can see that it is quite a few pages, and it continues to be quite a few pages. And as you scroll down, we get finally down to page 36 at the very end. So this is a large policy. I'm not going to go over the policy. I'm going to go over my Spark notes. So a couple things in here. So we already talked about that warbler tone. So if on your radio you hear a tone going up and down, up and down, up and down, that probably means that there's some critical safety information that needs to be disseminated to crews. So let them do that. Don't talk on the radio. Additionally, for an MCI, there are 5 different levels of MCI that can be declared. This would be you declaring it. A level 1 is anything less than 10 patients. A level 2, anything less than 20 patients. Level 3, 100, 4,000, and level 5 is anything above 1,000 patients. So level 1 is the least critical. Level 5 is the most critical. Now, technically, an MCI is 3 or more patients whenever the number of patients exceeds our resources. On there, Santa Clara is more kind of codified it specifically. In terms of an MCI, one of our big jobs on the medical side is triage. So we're going to be using the simple triage and rapid transport guide. And if it's a pediatric patient less than 8 years of age or 100 pounds, then we're going to use the jump start. So start versus jump start. For pediatrics, if they are not able to walk, not able to move, they're never going to be minor patients. We want to start by taking those patients and moving them into the treatment area. But for everyone else, we want to start by just calling out, hey, if you can hear my voice, walk towards me. If you can hear my voice, walk towards me. And if they're able to walk, that tells us a ton of things. It tells us that they were able to listen to you. They're able to process, ooh, they want me to walk over there. They were able to physically get up and ambulate over to your area. So on there, they could have amputations, they could have large lacerations. We're going to treat them first, but they're able to walk, they're able to move, they're physiologically minor. So we're going to tag them green. And then again, for kids, if they can't walk, then they can't be minor. So just move them over to the treatment area. So next, we're going to use the acronym RPM, respirations, perfusion, and then mental status. So respirations, first off, are you breathing? If there is spontaneous breathing, I want to make sure it's within a range. So for adults, 8 to 30, for pediatrics, 15 to 45. So pediatrics, they breathe faster, so we change that. But if they're not breathing, for both of these, I want to start by head tilt chin lifting. So position manually the airway to open it. If they immediately start breathing, awesome, tag them immediate. And then manage their airway, put an OPA, NPA, put them on their side in the recovery position, kind of whatever you need to do. For an adult, though, if I do the head tilt chin lift and they do not start breathing, I don't have the time to ventilate them, so they are going to be marked as expectant. But for a child, airway, that's such a big thing. And so I want to see if they have a palpable pulse, if their heart is beating. I'm going to use a carotid artery pulse for that one. And if their heart is indeed beating, then I want to give them 5 rescue breaths. So just like in CPR with your 30 to 2, those 2 breaths, we're going to make it 5. A breath in over a second, pause for a second, breath in over a second. So it should take 10 seconds maximum. It should hopefully remind the diaphragm, oh yeah, breathing, that's that thing I should be doing. If at the end of that, they do start breathing, tag them immediate. Otherwise, at any point during that, so if they don't have a pulse or if they don't breathe, we're going to tag them as expectant. So that's going to be our R, respirations. So are you breathing? If not, head tilt chin lift. If you are breathing, check the rate. Then we're going to check for perfusion. So for adults, I have a choice. I can either check a capillary refill or I can check a distal pulse, so your radial pulse. If I can feel your radial pulse, your blood pressure is around 80 or higher milliliters per mercury systolic. If I cannot feel it, but you have a carotid artery pulse, then your heart's beating, it's just not beating with enough pressure to really perfuse through, or you have a tourniquet on or something funky like that. So those are the two that I'm going to use for adults. If I feel that pulse, or if your capillary refill is under 2 seconds, move on. Otherwise, immediate. For a child, though, the only thing that I'm going to do is that palpable distal pulse. I'm not going to check for capillary refill because just skin signs are wonky for kids. So now we have M, mental status. So for an adult, I'm going to ask them to follow a command. Hey, can you go ahead and point your toe? Can you go ahead and blink twice? Can you go ahead and put your hand on top of your head? Whatever it is. And then if they're able to follow the commands, awesome. They were not able to walk earlier, so they're not minor, but they're going to be considered delayed. For pediatric, though, I'm not going to go to a baby and say, all right, give me a thumbs up. So on there, if they are alert or responsive to verbal stimuli, they're fine, they're delayed. But if they're responsive to painful stimuli or unresponsive, then they're going to be set up as immediate. So that's going to be our triage criteria. Those are really the three things in this policy that, that they're going to test on. So that's all the tested material. I have two more policies that I want to quickly go over, and then we'll go back to my quizzy quiz. So policy 622, ambulance patient offload delay. So it is your job to treat patients and then transport them to the closest appropriate hospital that is accepting patients. It's the hospital's job to, if they're full and not able to accept patients, go on to bypass, or otherwise, it's the hospital's responsibility to offload the patient within 20 minutes. So they have 20 minutes from when you arrive at the hospital and come and knock on their door to when they do that transfer of care. An ambulance patient offload delay is when that time exceeds 20 minutes. So if it's 20 minutes up until 59 minutes, it's considered an APOD. If it gets greater than 60 minutes, it's considered an APOD centennial event. Centennial events, they carry a lot more weight with them. If it is a patient with a hurt toe that has a centennial event, it's not going to be as much. But if it's a patient who's actively having seizures, that's a really big deal. And that really is a level A variance right there, because that patient should have been transferred care into the hospital. They weren't due to a failure for a hospital to follow procedure, and that resulted in a patient seizing in the back of an ambulance. So on there, kind of that's some of the leverage items that we have, specifically that I have as your supervisor. So when we're looking at mitigation procedures, as soon as you arrive at the hospital, let the hospital know they are there. And then additionally, once it's reached 20 minutes, go back and check in with them. If they still tell you, hey, sorry, we're still full, then make sure you contact your dispatch. Let them know, just for personnel accountability, hey, like, we're at an ambulance patient offload delay. If your patient has toe pain, don't worry about it, just hang out. If your patient is having a problem, then you need to notify your EMS supervisor. For me, once you notify me, there are a ton of things that I can do. Specifically, I need to notify the EMS duty chief for all patients held longer than 45 minutes. If it is a patient with toe pain, I'm not going to notify the duty chief for a lot longer than 45 minutes. But on there is specifically, if this turns into a centennial event, if this turns into that 60-minute plus, I really do need you to contact your supervisor, because we need to get that patient out of your ambulance. And also, we need to get you back on the road to do more calls as well. So on there, anytime that there is a transfer of care over 60 minutes, the hospital needs to kind of answer for their crimes. And then that's just a ding on them. So specifically, your job is arrive at the hospital, transfer care. If you can't, at 20 minutes, go back and let them know, and then let your dispatcher know. If it's significant, contact your supervisor. Otherwise, every 20 minutes, contact with dispatch up till 60 minutes, in which case check in with ER staff, check in with dispatch, and then do speak with me. So that's your ambulance patient offload. And then the last policy I want to bring your attention to is policy 808, which is your interfacility transportation guide. It's not for you. It's something that the goal of this is to be given to skilled nursing facilities to help them choose what type of ambulance that they need for a patient. And so specifically, they outline kind of EMT, paramedic, and CCT, and they give essentially your scope of practice. It's not entirely accurate. So there's some things here like blood sugar monitoring. where, yeah, that is BLS skill. It's not written on this policy. But the other things through here that I get questions on a lot. So for instance, can EMTs monitor a patient, transport a patient who has actively flowing saline, dextrose, or lactated ringers? And the answer is, yeah, totally fine. If they already have an indwelling vascular access line, so if they have an IV that's saline locked, no problem. Totally under the BLS procedure. So that's policy 808. I just think it is cool to know and cool to know where it is located.